The Nameless Echo. From chaos, shadows awaken.
At first light, custodians emerge with sanctified brushes and brine solutions. They work in methodical silence, sluicing crimson stains from the cathedral steps until the runoff runs pale pink through blessed drains. By gate opening, the marble gleams clean enough for prostration. The queues have already formed. Hymns rise not as songs, but as collective pressure, millions of voices compressed into ritual cadence. Shrine World. Mordian Sanctus processes 2.3 billion pilgrims annually, according to Administratum intake manifests. Planetary departure records show only 890 million exits. The remainder, approximately 1.4 billion souls, do not appear in casualty reports, medical termination logs, or conscription transfers. They are not enumerated among the dead, relocated, or retained. They simply vanish from imperial census reconciliation, their identification numbers recycled after standard administrative intervals. This arithmetic defines the fundamental paradox of humanity's most sacred destinations. Worlds marketed through ecclesiarchy propaganda as spiritual salvation function, as vast consumption engines. Their cathedrals serving purposes that transcend worship. The promotional materials promise purification and blessed return to family. The ledgers specify different outcomes. Every pilgrim receives a pilgrim's indulgence upon atmospheric entry, a vellum document bearing biometric seals and embedded data strips. The indulgence promises safe conduct through sacred precincts and guaranteed spiritual advancement commensurate with devotional investment. In practice, it functions as a machine-readable confession, tracking bearer movement through predetermined processing channels. Classification algorithms sort arrivals by age, health status, psychological profile, and estimated spiritual value. Each stamp marks custody transfer, from orbital intake to transit pens, from hostel nave to reliquary circuit, from confession hall to labor assignment. The faithful believe their indulgence proves divine recognition. It proves only systematic observation. Cathedral districts pulse with devotional magnetism, a phenomenon measured with the same precision applied to atmospheric pressure. Faith concentration creates quantifiable effects. Elevated psychic resonance readings, increased warp interface fluctuations, and what operational briefings term enhanced spiritual receptivity conditions. Astropaths chart this psychic weather as pressure ridges in local immaterium space. Choirs synchronize heartbeats across kilometers. Visions propagate like contagion. Architecture, designed to focus prayer, also focuses whatever listens back from the void. The custodians complete their work as entry clearance begins. Their supervisor logs standard metrics: 14 liters of sanctified detergent, 47 meters of blessed cloth, 2 scrub brushes worn beyond service tolerance. Tomorrow requires identical preparations. The missing billions represent more than statistical anomaly. They constitute the primary output of Shrine World operations. The pilgrim's indulgence documents their journey from arrival to disappearance with bureaucratic thoroughness, each signature marking progress toward endpoints that exist nowhere in official records. This is not warning, but cartography. The queues will form. The hymns will rise. The steps will require washing. To understand Shrine World fatalities, study the maps confessors carry in sealed cases. These worlds are not cities but instruments, landscapes engineered for devotional processing and psychic containment. The Ministerum's spatial doctrine renders them in concentric rings of sanctity radiating from primary reliquaries, each zone functioning as both spiritual threshold and administrative filter. The outer penitential encompasses orbital processing stations that sort 40,000 pilgrims hourly through intake bays, designed like cathedral naves. Automated systems scan pilgrims' indulgences for biometric data, cross-reference devotional compliance scores, and assign surface destinations based on algorithmic assessment. Those classified as spiritually deficient receive extended orbital quarantine, months of supplemental devotional education, while administrators determine their optimal utility. The faithful believe this delay represents divine testing. It represents systematic evaluation. Surface transit systems channel approved pilgrims through maglev arteries designed for one-way flow toward cathedral districts. Return lines are freight-only, locked to ministorum access codes. Emergency evacuation protocols exist solely on classified schematics requiring crimson-level clearance. The architecture of movement permits only inward progress toward the relic. Wayfinding litanies replace maps. Pilgrims learn songs that guide them along sanctioned paths toward predetermined endpoints. The middle penitential houses the masses in dormitory complexes where standard allocation provides 1.3 square meters per pilgrim. Atmospheric recycling systems operate beyond design parameters, creating oxygen debt that manifests as shared hallucinations, interpreted as divine visions. Medical facilities treat suffocation symptoms as spiritual ecstasy, prescribing additional crowding as therapeutic intensification of faith. Mortality spikes at known choke points. Custodial schedules accommodate predictable washdown requirements. Proximity taxation governs access to inner sanctums through escalating devotional costs. The reliquary cordon requires documented charitable donations equivalent to average annual imperial income. The inner sanctum demands completion of penance cycles lasting minimum 18 months. The sanctum proper accepts only those who surrender legal identity through vows of eternal service. Each ring demands exponentially higher spiritual investment while providing diminishing physical space and increasing mortality risk. The Triune Seal Protocol represents ultimate containment capability. Seal Primus shutters transit gates and reverses escalant flow, corralling pilgrims behind hymn walls and servo barriers. Seal Secundus drops reliquary blast shutters and floods precincts with consecrated mist laced with soporifics. Processions slow, then kneel in chemically induced compliance. Seal Tertius activates final lockdown, atmospheric purge, ignited sensors, and hardened perimeter doors until Arbite's detachments arrive for spiritual reconciliation. Duration varies from hours to weeks, depending on threat assessment. This spatial organization follows ancient warp isolation protocols adapted to stone and statute. Sacred geometry creates psychic containment fields that channel devotional energy toward central reliquaries while preventing uncontrolled spiritual dispersal. Cathedral spires function as psychic lightning rods, their blessed copper conducting faith-generated warp fluctuations into sanctified ground systems. The concentric design isolates spiritual pressure within manageable zones, preventing cascade failures that could tear local reality. These arrangements transform pilgrimage sites into quarantine facilities, designed to manage forces beyond human comprehension. On shrine worlds, holiness operates as industrial freight. Supply chains begin at battlefield ossuaries, where ecclesiarchy harvest guilds sift through spoil mounds for bone fragments and blessed scrap. Each recovery follows standardized protocols, immediate cataloging, antiseptic wrapping, and chain of custody documentation that transforms martyrdom into renewable commodity. St. Euphrates' left femur exemplifies this systematic sanctification. Recovered from Cadian Gate ashfields measuring 43.7 centimeters with documented lasgun scoring, the bone underwent orbital processing within 6 hours. Hospitaller osteologians conducted marrow extraction for genetic authentication, while cult mechanicus technicians performed isotopic aging against hagiographic timelines. Probability classification rose from battlefield recovery to authenticated primary after conclave verification. Demand exceeds anatomy. The authenticated femur entered sanctified subdivision protocols, precision cutting by blessed laser operated by lobotomized servitors. Canon law redaction. 13. Permits elevation of portional primaries when pastoral needs dictate. 17 fragments, measuring minimum 2.3 centimeters each, received individual consecration and separate reliquary assignments. Administrative records classify these pieces as discrete, complete relics rather than subdivisions. 17 worlds now possess St. Euphrates' complete femur as their primary relic. Authenticity protocols govern this multiplication through verification systems that generate more documentation than fraud prevention. Each fragment requires chain of custody benedictions signed by minimum 3 ordained witnesses, genetic verification scrolls cross-referenced against martyrdom archives, and psychic resonance certificates updated quarterly. The sigillum veritatis, triply redundant seals with micro-etchings visible only under blessed lenses, marks each item. Auditors conduct random devotions comparing sense signatures of oils and cadence of recorded hymns against canonical baselines. The system catches some frauds while creating employment for thousands of scribes and ensuring continuous bureaucratic oversight. Contact relic production expands supply exponentially. Blessed cloth pressed against authenticated fragments for minimum 7 minutes acquires secondary holy classification. A single fragment generates approximately 400 contact relics annually through systematic rotation schedules. Orbital manufactoria mass-produce reliquaries by 100,000 lots, stamped shrines, ribboned ampules, glassed pendants. Each brief contact, recorded as an event code, transforms cheap matter into saleable sanctity. Sacred saturation emerges when blessed materials achieve critical density. Psychic resonance readings spike as holy artifacts accumulate, creating measurable disturbances in local warp interface conditions. Shrine administrators monitor these levels through the S-index. At 2.0, dreams intensify. At 3.2, mass visions propagate. At 4.5, unauthorized phenomena manifest through stone. Optimal saturation enhances pilgrim processing efficiency. Excessive saturation attracts entities beyond approved imperial theology. The deep archives contain relics too dangerous for public veneration, artifacts whose psychic resonance exceeds containment protocols or demonstrates unpredictable behavioral patterns. Specialized storage requires sanctified lead chambers lined with blessed silver under constant astropathic monitoring. Access demands joint Inquisition Ecclesiarchy authorization. The catalogue includes fragments that whisper tactical information, blessed weapons firing without ammunition, and contact materials reproducing beyond industrial control. Storage costs for dangerous relics exceed devotional value, yet destruction remains prohibited under ecclesiarchy doctrine. These facilities represent hidden infrastructure, where sanctity becomes liability and blessing becomes containment protocol. The relic economy transforms death into measurable psychic pressure, feeding shrine world operations while generating materials that exceed safe handling parameters. Confession queues stretch across cathedral districts in parallel lines marked by blessed rope and servo skull guidance systems. Each line processes 800 souls per shift through standardized spiritual assessment protocols. Penitents advance at measured intervals, 30 seconds per station, 4 minutes maximum confession time. The faithful believe confession cleanses their souls. It catalogues their exploitable capabilities. Confessor auditors operate from enclosed booths equipped with biometric scanners and the penance allocation engine, a litanic algorithm trained on centuries of hagiographic data and behavioral analysis. Voice print recordings, pupil dilation, galvanic skin response, and mnemonic recall patterns feed into calculation matrices that assign spiritual debt with industrial precision. Minor infractions merit standard labor assignments, 14-hour prayer shifts, reliquary maintenance, blessed floor scrubbing. Major violations trigger enhanced service protocols requiring extended commitment. The machine calculates contrition in measurable units of human utility. Penance assignments emerge as printed ribbons threaded through Pilgrims' indulgences, each prescription representing systematic value extraction disguised as spiritual advancement. Refusal remains doctrinally permitted, but downgrades devotional scores and suspends access to reliquary circuits. The faithful learn quickly that grace operates through queue management. The penitent protocols govern systematic erosion of legal identity through voluntary spiritual elevation programs. Initial assignments appear temporary, 3 months of devotional service demonstrating commitment. Completion triggers advancement opportunities requiring extended obligation. Stage 1 assigns sanitation and hymn leading. Stage 2 transfers subjects to manufactoria and night watch duties. Stage 3 removes wage ledgers, replacing them with merit tallies exchangeable only for devotional tokens. Stage 4 erases surnames and issues numbers. Each decision point offers choices between deeper service or admission of spiritual inadequacy. Legal status softens at administrative edges until citizenship becomes ecclesiarchy property through procedural inertia. Hospitaller facilities support this processing by treating spiritual ailments as physical symptoms requiring therapeutic intervention. Exhaustion becomes spiritual receptivity syndrome, treated with increased devotional activity. Malnutrition manifests as blessed purification, requiring continued fasting. Psychological breakdown indicates divine communication overload, managed through isolation and enhanced prayer requirements. Classification systems determine treatment versus blessed suffering based on administrative utility rather than medical need. Those demonstrating valuable skills receive intervention, preserving their service capacity. Those lacking exploitable abilities experience blessed suffering as spiritual advancement, deterioration reframed as devotional achievement. Miraculous stations operate throughout processing areas as crowd psychology management tools disguised as spontaneous divine intervention sites. These guilt-framed kiosks integrate choir backloops, subsonic resonators keyed to cardiac rhythm, directed myrrh scent, and photic flicker calibrated just below seizure threshold. Concealed sensor arrays monitor crowd density, stress indicators, and behavioral patterns. When tension approaches dangerous levels, the stations activate, recorded voices speaking pilgrim names, euphoric vapor release, and hololithic displays creating shared visual experiences. Pilgrims step in, see light, hear their names uttered, fall weeping, and leave convinced of divine contact. Administrators observe successful behavioral modification through technological intervention. Processing continues through predetermined channels toward predetermined endpoints. The queues shorten but never end. Custodians prepare for tomorrow's washdown requirements. Classified Ordo Hereticus memoranda designate it devotional magnetism protocol. The imperial understanding that concentrated human belief creates measurable psychic pressure differentials in local warp space. Shrine worlds, saturated with relics and synchronized prayer, form deep impressions in immaterium topology. Something always flows to fill the void. Inquisitorial incident reports spanning 6 millennia document repeatable correlations between pilgrimage density, relic saturation, and spontaneous manifestations requiring orbital intervention. Monitoring stations disguised as atmospheric processors and bell towers contain Geller-shielded sensor arrays measuring devotional intensity through specialized instruments. The S-index tracks psychic resonance in standardized units. Baseline human prayer registers 0.3. Synchronized cathedral choirs reach 47. Mass pilgrimage events spike beyond 200. Servo anemometers spin in still air, detecting temperature inversions that precede dimensional thinning. Chromatic aberration scanners monitor daylight distortion. Sand in courtyards skitters without wind when psychic gradients steepen beyond tolerance windows. These readings correlate with warp interface instability. Astropathic monitoring stations chart devotional energy as topographical features in immaterium space. Spiritual gravity wells, where reality becomes permeable to entities operating beyond approved imperial theology. Concentrated faith creates beacons visible across impossible distances, attracting attention from forces whose interest in human devotion serves purposes antithetical to doctrine. Faith cascade events represent system failure conditions. Under specific parameters, high S-index readings, architectural focus, synchronized posture, and mass spiritual experience, accumulated psychic pressure exceeds containment thresholds. The Mordian Sanctus Tertiary incident documented complete cascade progression. Initial shared vision affecting 340,000 pilgrims, escalating psychic feedback loops, reality membrane rupture, and entity manifestation requiring exterminatus protocols. Official records classify the incident as blessed martyrdom during transcendent experience. Early warning systems activate countermeasures when readings approach cascade parameters. Subsonic generators disrupt synchronized breathing patterns. Photic scramblers break visual focus during mass prayer. Aerosol dispensers release mild disorientation compounds, preventing collective transcendence. The faithful interpret these interventions as atmospheric conditions. Technical staff manage them as essential safety protocols, preventing reality breach. The Triune Seal Protocol serves dual functions beyond crowd control. It provides psychic quarantine capability during warp interface emergencies. Seal activation triggers not only physical barriers, but psychic dampening fields containing spiritual energy within manageable zones. Blessed copper grounding systems channel excess devotional energy into sanctified earth rather than immaterium space. Emergency protocols exist for controlled cascade initiation, deliberately triggering faith events under contained conditions to discharge accumulated pressure before critical thresholds. Balancing spiritual intensity with warp safety requires administrative arithmetic disguised as piety. The ministorum demands high saturation for maximum conversions and offerings. The Ordo Hereticus demands operational ceilings and buffer protocols. Planetary governors demand throughput quotas. Compromise yields stepped calendars, sacrificial off-seasons, and systematic risk management. The entities drawn by concentrated devotion possess documented behavioral patterns and exploitable vulnerabilities. The containment systems designed to manage them fail in predictable ways. Shrine worlds function as sanctified panopticons where surveillance masquerades as spiritual architecture. Picked lenses peer through saintly eyes. Vox pickups frame confessional grills. Servo skulls drift like incense through crowded naves. 3 enforcement arms maintain overlapping jurisdictions, while feeding the same intelligence apparatus. Arbites crowd suppression, sororitas purity enforcement, and inquisitorial deep monitoring. Arbites crowd suppression doctrine treats devotional masses as hydraulic systems requiring controlled flow. Riot geometry manuals specify wedge formations down cathedral aisles, sonic cannon placement at choke points, and predictive algorithms that ingest pilgrim density, S-index readings, and hymn tempo to forecast stampede probability within 2-minute windows. When crowd pressure exceeds parameters, shock malls rise and soporific grenades deploy along predetermined dispersal routes. The enforcement presence meant to ensure safety frequently triggers the panic it seeks to prevent. Sirens spike heart rates, formations block exits, and bodies surge toward passages engineered for inward flow only. Adepta Sororitas conduct systematic purity sweeps using portable reliquaries that detect psychic contamination, and catechism drills that separate orthodoxy from deviation. Their efficiency remains real, but limited by doctrinal blind spots. Malnutrition edema triggers mutation alerts, while disciplined cult cells rehearse orthodox responses and pass undetected. War trauma silence reads as witch sign. The sweeps purify the visible while missing the practiced, creating security theatre that catches harmless deviants while genuine threats exploit procedural gaps. Inquisitorial. Monitoring networks complete the surveillance grid through the confession industrial complex, the systematic conversion of spiritual guidance into intelligence extraction. Every whispered sin feeds data mining algorithms, constructing detailed psychological profiles. Confessor auditors receive training in interrogation techniques disguised as pastoral care, extracting information about family networks, economic circumstances, and exploitable vulnerabilities. Biometric scanners track movement patterns, while micro-expression analysis flags deception during absolution. The faithful believe they commune privately with the divine. They perform under constant algorithmic assessment. These layered systems generate their own attack surfaces through operational complexity. Confession databases leak through underpaid scribe guilds, selling devotional records to black market operators. Servo skulls marketed as religious souvenirs retain active surveillance subroutines. Purity test protocols produce false positives that overwhelm tribunals, while genuine infiltrators exploit the chaos. In documented incidents, Arbite's warning klaxons pushed S-index readings beyond safe thresholds, forcing triune seal activation that trapped pilgrims with the very anomalies the alerts sought to prevent. The Deep Pilgrimage program operates within these surveillance frameworks as covert recruitment infrastructure. Individuals flag through confession analysis, demonstrating high pain tolerance, family isolation, or specialized skills, receive quiet invitations for advanced spiritual development. Participants undergo systematic conditioning disguised as mystical experience, emerging with implanted loyalties and selective memory modification. The program transforms pilgrims into imperial assets under spiritual advancement cover. Choir bearers in forbidden vaults, reliquary couriers on sealed routes, or expendable operatives for deniable operations. Control mechanisms multiply faster than the threats they address, creating surveillance apparatus serving interests far beyond Shrine World security. The intelligence gathering feeds administratum population management, Arbite's enforcement targeting, and inquisitorial asset acquisition across the Imperium's breadth. At dusk, when hymn cycles pause and custodial shifts drain their sanctified buckets, the undercroft markets awaken. Lamps sputter in buttress shadows, while incense smoke mingles with frying tallow. Unblessed bread changes hands beneath prayer kneeler stalls. Even contraband bears the aesthetic of devotion. Unblessed food represents logistical necessity disguised as sin. Blessing requires priest hours. Priest hours remain scarce against pilgrim volume. Black market nutrition stretches liturgical calendars by feeding bodies the ecclesiarchy cannot schedule for sanctification. Kitchen servitors, maintenance crews, and off-shift hospitalers operate smuggling networks through service tunnels and unused confessionals. Hospitaller orderlies maintain calculated blindness because fainting pilgrims jam triage naves and disrupt processing quotas. Official ration queues shorten. Tithes still arrive. Minor trespass purchases, major throughput. Forged indulgence stamps move through back chapels with confession booth quiet. Corrupted scribes misplace seals for negotiated fees. Servo skulls return from maintenance with adjustable watermark routines. Quality forgeries cost average imperial monthly wages. Crude reproductions trade for prayer shift labor or intimate services. One falsified stamp transforms outer hostile classification to reliquary circuit access, accelerating proximity and mortality risk simultaneously. Accelerated penance euphemizes harsher spiritual commerce. Private confession booths offer machine-administered flagellation with documentation. Complete 3 cycles immediately. Reduce months of service obligation later. Merit tallies become purchasable through donations converted to candles and administrative reports. Freelance spiritual advisors, defrocked priests and failed seminary candidates, process sins through abbreviated liturgies in dormitory districts, providing psychological relief and forged documentation, enabling faster bureaucratic progression. Administrative tolerance operates through pressure physics calculations rather than moral assessment. Without off-book nutrition, falsified advancement, and purchasable absolution, intake slows, queues lengthen, and S-index readings drift toward cascade conditions. Authorities distinguish tolerated from punishable infractions through economic threat assessment. Small-scale food smuggling reduces medical intervention costs. Limited forgery prevents dangerous queue jumping disrupting crowd flow. Enforcement targets operations exceeding predetermined thresholds or competing with official monopolies. Purges arrive on scheduled intervals disguised as spontaneous zeal. Arbites confiscate cauldrons, Sororitas burn counterfeit seals. News sheets praise sudden rectitude. Crackdowns follow surplus weeks when hostile capacity dips, or after minor warp tremors, spike readings requiring demonstration of administrative control. The quiet doors handle what sermons cannot resolve. Brass aquilus mark plain timber entrances to basement chambers beneath cathedral administration wings. Inside, benches, ledgers, 3 functionaries, document chutes. Pilgrims cited for spiritual infractions face binary processing, enhanced devotional tithes, or permanent service assignment. Those purchasing administrative mercy receive absolution and return to standard queues. Those lacking resources disappear into labor pools, maintaining shrine world infrastructure through hazardous maintenance, relic handling, and waste management. Grey markets transform survival necessity into systematic extraction mechanisms. The shadow economy feeds bodies while harvesting souls through calculated desperation, ensuring tomorrow's custodial requirements. Vaxhalla Prime's feast of St. Drusilla's Ascension opened with manageable parameters, S-index at 87.3, orbital processing at 118% capacity, atmospheric recyclers operating within tolerance. Standard overcrowding metrics registered 4.7 million pilgrims compressed into precincts designed for 2.8 million. Maglev lines delivered bodies in fixed cadence, inward only, as designed. Proximity taxation drove thousands toward reliquary access, while miraculous stations vented psychological pressure through scheduled euphoria bursts. Dawn custodians completed washdown protocols, anticipating routine spillage. The catalyst emerged from established supply chains. St. Drusilla's authenticated skull fragment, recently elevated from Cadian Gate battlefield recovery through accelerated verification, had passed standard authentication despite containing trace, warp-touched materials. Overwhelmed testing schedules and quota pressure created procedural gaps. The deep archives later confirmed the fragment carried residual corruption that activated under concentrated devotional focus, transforming blessed relic into psychic resonance amplifier. At 1847 hours, synchronized evening devotions began. 4 million voices chanted the litany of ascension while prostrating toward the primary reliquary. Collective faith focused through compromised holy matter created measurable effects. Servo anemometers spun in still air. Sand scattered without wind. Chromatic aberration scanners detected light distortion around the fragment. S-index spiked beyond measurement capacity as reality membrane stress exceeded containment thresholds. The fragment began harmonizing with the choir, a tuning fork struck by millions of throats. Crowd crush initiated in outer districts as peripheral pilgrims surged toward apparent divine manifestation. Bodies compressed against barriers designed for controlled flow, not pressure reversals. Human fluid sought equilibrium through passages engineered for one-way movement. Exit routes remained locked to Ministorum access codes. Emergency evacuation protocols required authorization levels unavailable during shift changes. 12,000 died through mechanical compression before supernatural elements manifested. Psychic resonance feedback amplified through architectural focusing systems. Cathedral spires, designed to ground excess devotional energy, inverted polarity under contaminated relic influence. Instead of channeling faith into sanctified earth, the system broadcasted across dimensional boundaries. Reality thinned to membrane consistency around the reliquary, while collective expectation provided psychic fuel for entities answering their call. Triune seal activation followed protocol precisely, becoming amplification rather than containment. Seal Primus shuttered transit gates, trapping surging crowds behind barriers. Seal Secundus flooded precincts with consecrated mist, but soporifics reacted with warp-charged atmosphere, creating hallucinogenic vapor, intensifying psychic phenomena. Seal Tertius initiated atmospheric purge and perimeter lockdown, sealing millions within cathedral districts as entities manifested through compromised reality membrane. The manifestations wore familiar forms: saints, angels, blessed martyrs, while demonstrating behaviors requiring immediate orbital intervention. Blessed copper grounding systems channeled entity presence throughout shrine infrastructure. Every safety protocol became transmission vector. Arbite's sonic cannons drove bodies against locked doors. Adepta Sororitas advanced through smoke with relic sensors raised, their purity litanies amplifying the resonance. Miraculous stations, still automated, fired euphoria into choke points where people smiled while suffocating. Cleansing operations commenced at 03:47 hours following orbital authorization. Prometheum lines opened in interlocked arcs. Sanctified fire washed transept and nave. Fire doors contained heat long enough to cauterize air. Plasma bombardment sterilized cathedral districts, while survivors remained sealed within blast zones. Kinetic strikes suppressed secondary anomalies. Localized earthquakes targeting congregations still singing beneath stone. Official casualty figures listed 890,000 martyrs achieving blessed transcendence. Actual mortality exceeded 6.2 million, including orbital crews, cleanup teams, and administrative staff exposed to contaminated materials. Every system functioned to specification and, in combination, became systematic extermination. One-way transit became traps. Authentication protocols missed contamination. Containment amplified corruption. Safety became slaughter. Post-incident analysis confirmed convergence represented operational success under conditions exceeding design parameters. A demonstration of how Shrine World infrastructure transforms pilgrimage into systematic vulnerability when multiple threat vectors intersect through administrative routine. Continuation hooks. How do authorities classify such disasters in official records? What long-term changes were implemented, and did they address root causes? The morning after Vaxhala Prime, the ledgers changed their nouns. Deaths became martyrdoms, stampedes became processions, containment failure became divine intervention. Administratum Circular 447. Reclassified all casualties within sealed precincts as transcendent transferals, exempt from liability tallies and eligible for posthumous tithe credits. The Ministorum printed commemorative broadsheets listing 6.2 million names, not as losses, but as proofs of overwhelming sanctity. Grief was repaginated into revenue through established economic reconciliation protocols. Infrastructure modifications followed predictable bureaucratic logic, more containment, not better evacuation. The Inquiry Board recommended enhanced triune seal capabilities, faster closure cycles, redundant atmospheric purge systems, and expanded lockdown. Perimeter's transit systems received additional seal layers without evacuation route improvements. Cathedral districts gained backup containment mechanisms without crowd flow modifications. Each safety enhancement systematically increased lethality by creating additional failure modes while generating documentation, proving improved security through measurable upgrades. The Pilgrims' indulgence system underwent comprehensive improvement, adding 17 verification stages and 3 supplemental authentication requirements. New biometric scans, genetic lineage verification, and psychological compliance testing increased processing time from average 4 hours to 14 hours per pilgrim. Queue lengths extended beyond hostel capacity, forcing overflow populations into tent cities lacking sanitation facilities. Enhanced verification caught fewer genuine threats while creating bottlenecks that elevated S-index readings through compressed desperation and extended exposure to concentrated sanctity. Doctrinal adjustments mandated stricter purity requirements without addressing operational overcrowding. New catechism examinations required memorization of extended liturgical passages, eliminating illiterate pilgrims who comprised 60% of typical populations. Enhanced confession protocols demanded detailed personal history disclosure, creating intelligence bonanzas while extending spiritual processing beyond sustainable duration. Revised penance calculations increased average service obligations from months to years, transforming temporary pilgrimage into permanent labor conscription through procedural escalation. Economic reconciliation. Protocols converted catastrophe into systematic profitability. Martyrdom tourism commenced within 18 months, pilgrims paying enhanced tithes to visit sites where millions achieved instant sainthood. The contaminated relic that triggered the cascade underwent multiplication through contact protocols. St. Drusilla's skull fragment was subdivided into 847 portions, distributed across shrine worlds as authenticated primary relics, each retaining sufficient psychic resonance to trigger similar events under appropriate conditions. Destroyed cathedral districts required reconstruction using blessed materials at premium costs, while memorial shrines arose at major casualty concentrations, creating additional devotional circuits and processing bottlenecks. The Deep Archives received comprehensive incident documentation under Seal Crimson classification, joining similar reports from 37 comparable Shrine World disasters spanning the previous millennium. Archivists convened joint boards with inquisitorial liaisons to determine narrative perimeter. For public release, overwhelming devotional transcendence requiring enhanced protective measures. For sealed shelves, telemetry showing authentication gaps, missed compound interactions, and systematic containment failures. Pattern analysis remained restricted to prevent understanding that might compromise operational effectiveness. Post-incident modifications created more dangerous systems while generating metrics proving enhanced safety through bureaucratic improvement documentation. Each catastrophe became justification for doubling the mechanisms that produced it. The washdown schedules expanded proportionally. Beneath Vaxhalla Prime's memorial shrines, data vaults hum with the accumulated confessions of 6 billion souls. The Deep Archives function as the Imperium's neural cortex, processing devotional metadata through tri-channel intelligence pipelines that transform spiritual guidance into systematic surveillance. Every whispered transgression feeds algorithms mapping imperial populations with precision exceeding any planetary census, while pilgrims believe they commune with divine mercy. Confessor auditors operate sophisticated intelligence extraction protocols disguised as pastoral care. Micro-expression analysis masquerades as detecting spiritual distress. Interrogation techniques frame themselves as drawing out hidden sins. Pharmaceutical enhancement during absolution creates chemically induced confession states, while biometric scanners harvest genetic samples through blessed relic touch stations. Voice print analysis during hymn participation identifies regional accents and psychological states, while sleep monitoring in overcrowded hostels records dream vocalization, mapping subconscious anxieties through automated analysis. This intelligence flows through established channels: Ordo Hereticus threat assessment, administratum population control algorithms, and local shrine administration calibration. Risk scores receive liturgical classifications: shepherd, stray, wolf, determining processing pathways and survival probability. Family networks become hostage leverage maps. Regional descent patterns inform Arbite's deployment schedules. Psychological profiles flag potential heretics, psychers, and recruitment assets across thousands of worlds. The Deep Pilgrimage program operates as covert asset production infrastructure. Individuals demonstrating high pain tolerance, family isolation, or exploitable trauma receive invitations for advanced spiritual development through algorithmic selection. Processing occurs in sealed cathedral basements equipped with psycho-conditioning apparatus. Mantra loops under sleep deprivation, sacramental alkaloids, transcranial induction strobes, and confession replay used as personalized gospel. Identity undergoes systematic modification, existing memories altered, loyalties reimplanted, personalities reconstructed to fit mission parameters. Graduates emerge as infiltrators, data couriers, or expendable witnesses for deniable operations, remembering enough to believe, but not enough to accuse. Miraculous stations reveal their true sophistication as predictor altars equipped with augur engines trained on confession databases. Each kiosk selects phrases, statistically meaningful to gathered crowds, whispers names scraped from indulgence barcodes, and times photic blooms to collective breathing patterns. Subsonic generators disrupt cardiac rhythms. Directed pheromone dispensers trigger specific emotional responses, and microdose pharmaceutical aerosols induce euphoric states precisely when S-index readings approach dangerous thresholds. Chemical transcendence follows crowd psychology algorithms, manufacturing divine intervention on administrative schedule. This apparatus serves imperial control objectives spanning galactic governance. Sector governors receive descent heat maps disguised as piety dashboards. Tithe quotas adjust based on psychological compliance projections. Heresy hunts begin months before heresies articulate, guided by pre-incident profiles sourced from spiritual guidance sessions. Conscription forecasts incorporate shrine world attrition, while recruitment algorithms identify useful assets among the faithful. Occasionally, pilgrims notice operational seams, stations calling dead children's names from misfiled data ribbons, confessors quoting private doubts from previous sessions. The archives maintain two remedies: recruitment into deep pilgrimage, converting dangerous insight into controlled utility, or summary processing through quiet doors into permanent silence service. Discovery becomes either asset conversion or systematic elimination. On shrine worlds, madness adopts liturgical classification. Faith-induced psychosis manifests when prolonged exposure to concentrated sanctity overwhelms cognitive processing thresholds. Pilgrims develop auditory hallucinations, interpreting ventilator hums as saintly voices, visual distortions transforming architectural features into divine iconography, and compulsive behavioral loops, endless genuflection, repetitive litany recitation, ritualized self-harm disguised as penance. Incidence correlates directly with S-index readings. At levels above 70, outbreaks occur in one of every 3 dormitory bays weekly. Above 120, glossolalia storms roll through hostels like atmospheric disturbances, leaving hundreds hoarse and docile. Stigmata syndrome occupies the profitable border between imitation and injury. Subjects develop spontaneous wounds, matching canonical martyrdom patterns, nail holes in palms, crown punctures across foreheads, lash marks following documented scourging sequences. Hospitaller facilities classify these lesions as miraculous manifestations rather than self-inflicted trauma performed during dissociative episodes. Treatment protocols prescribe wound maintenance rather than healing, converting triage into veneration. Affected individuals become living relics, generating secondary devotional circuits, while their collected blood enters relic supply chains as authenticated contact materials. Saint's fever drives escalating acts of dangerous penance through manic progression curves. Initial symptoms include extended fasting and sleep deprivation, advancing to hypoxic prayer in incense-choked chapels, culminating in industrial penances, sanitation pit exposure without respirators, reactor conduit crawls, voluntary reliquary fumigation. Mortality hides in administrative euphemisms. Voluntary transitus during devotions. The condition spreads through mimetic contagion, amplified by overcrowding. 10 to a bunk, 40 to a bay, thousands witnessing extreme devotion and competing for divine recognition through measurable suffering. These pathologies propagate through architectural design, maximizing psychological pressure. Dormitory districts providing 1.3 square meters per pilgrim create sensory deprivation chambers where individual identity dissolves into collective experience. Atmospheric recycling redistributes pharmaceutical residues from blessed incense, while malnutrition produces neurochemical changes interpreted as spiritual elevation. Hymn loops create auditory hypnosis. Shared hallucinations develop through synchronized sleep cycles and respiratory patterns. Absolute orthodoxy paradoxically breeds doctrinal mutation through interpretive pressure. When standard penance fails to provide psychological relief, pilgrims develop enhanced devotional practices. Secret litanies promising accelerated salvation, unauthorized ritual combinations, theological innovations explaining unique spiritual experiences. These devotional mutations spread through whispered transmission, creating heretical cells emerging from excessive rather than insufficient faith. Shrine authorities maintain pathology cultivation protocols disguised as pastoral care. Stigmata cases receive specialized nutrition, maintaining wound visibility while preventing fatal blood loss. Saints' fever progression undergoes monitoring through embedded observers, documenting escalation stages for replication. Faith psychosis subjects experience controlled exposure, creating predictable behavioral responses, useful for crowd management and intelligence extraction. These conditions serve systematic administrative functions rather than representing unfortunate byproducts. Stigmata generates martyrdom tourism revenue. Saints' fever creates competitive devotional investment. Psychosis produces compliant labor through cognitive dissolution. Pathological pilgrims become optimized human resources through spiritual conditioning, eliminating resistance while maintaining productivity. Continuation hooks. How do cultivated pathologies serve imperial administrative goals? What is the ultimate reframing that explains all these systematic dangers? The ledgers do not lie. They simply count different commodities than advertised. Shrine worlds represent the Imperium's most sophisticated human processing infrastructure, not accidentally dangerous due to bureaucratic incompetence, but systematically engineered because the Imperium has weaponized faith itself. Every mechanism documented in previous chapters functions as designed, sorting, extracting, and consuming human spiritual need through 4 coordinated operational vectors. Population control through spiritual exhaustion drains excess demographic pressure from overpopulated sectors while converting potential dissidents into docile assets. The pilgrimage process, overcrowding protocols, malnutrition schedules, sensory manipulation, and engineered pathologies systematically reduces both life expectancy and political resistance. Those surviving return to homeworlds spiritually depleted, psychologically compliant, and economically dependent on ecclesiarchy support networks. The architecture of devotion becomes infrastructure of pacification. Intelligence extraction operates through the confession industrial complex, transforming pastoral care into involuntary surveillance participation. Every whispered transgression maps family networks, catalogues psychological vulnerabilities, and identifies regional descent patterns. The data feeds inquisitorial threat assessment algorithms, administratum population control matrices, and enforcement targeting systems spanning galactic breadth. Confession databases provide more comprehensive population intelligence than any planetary census, while subjects believe they receive divine absolution. Labor conscription channels through penitent protocols designed to erode legal identity via voluntary spiritual advancement. Each penance assignment extracts systematic value disguised as devotional service. Stage progression eliminates wage obligations, removes citizenship protections, and converts pilgrims into permanent workforce maintaining shrine infrastructure through hazardous operations. The faithful become indentured servants, believing their bondage represents spiritual elevation toward predetermined salvation. Warp manipulation exploits concentrated devotion as psychic fuel for imperial operations. Controlled devotional saturation creates measurable reality distortions, channeled through architectural focusing systems into astropathic networks, Geller field generators, and sanctified weapons production. The architectural design that appears to honor saints actually functions as psychic collection apparatus, transforming human spiritual energy into usable supernatural infrastructure, while believers assume they commune with divine presence. The missing 1.4 billion from Mordian Sanctus represent intended output rather than operational failure. Administrative euphemisms obscure systematic sorting. Transcendent transferals become deep archive assets through psychological reconditioning. Voluntary service advancement feeds imperial labor shortages. Blessed suffering eliminates surplus populations. And martyrdom achievement provides cover for industrial consumption of human resources. Processing channels route bodies toward endpoints, serving imperial utility, off-world conscription, servitor conversion, hazardous maintenance, waste management, or simple dissolution into administrative categories until biography becomes commodity. Every safety measure functions as processing equipment rather than protection. The Pilgrims' indulgence tracks custody, transfers through predetermined channels. Triune seal protocols sort populations by utility classification during emergencies. Miraculous stations manufacture compliance through technological manipulation. Proximity taxation extracts maximum investment before consumption. One-way transit systems prevent escape. The confession. Industrial complex harvests psychological profiles. Each mechanism transforms human spiritual need into quantifiable imperial resource. Shrine worlds perfect the conversion of humanity's greatest vulnerability, desperate search for meaning, into systematic control infrastructure. The true offering is not devotion, but systematic human processing disguised as salvation. Continuation. Hooks. How does this systematic exploitation serve the Imperium's broader survival strategy? What does this reveal about the nature of imperial governance? At first light, custodians emerge with sanctified brushes and brine solutions. They work in methodical silence, sluicing crimson stains from cathedral steps until runoff runs pale pink through blessed drains. The blood is not accidental spillage, but systematic extraction, hydraulic byproduct of processing 2.3 billion pilgrims annually through infrastructure designed for consumption rather than salvation. By gate opening, marble gleams clean enough for prostration. The queues have already formed. Administrative reconciliation for Shrine World Mordian Sanctus provides clinical assessment of processing efficiency. Of 2.3 billion annual arrivals versus 890 million recorded departures, the 1.4 billion differential represents intended output rather than operational failure. Outer penitential populations show 39% return probability within standard processing cycles. 31% convert to penitent protocol service assignments. 18% advance to deep pilgrimage conditioning. 12% resolve through quiet doors adjudication. Reliquary circuit access reduces departure rates to 22%, while increasing permanent service absorption to 67%. Inner sanctum entrance, comprising 0.4% of total intake, exhibit 97% retention through vows of eternal service, or transcendent transferal classification. Triune seal activations average 23 per standard year across cathedral precincts, with mean enclosure populations of 340,000 and median duration of 14 hours. S-index exposures exceeding 80 persisted average 31 minutes during major feast cycles. Readings above 120 lasted 6 minutes before containment protocols engaged. Confession. Industrial complex processed 847 million psychological profiles annually, feeding inquisitorial databases and administratum population algorithms. Miraculous station interventions prevented 156 crowd crush incidents, while manufacturing 2.1 million documented divine experiences through technological manipulation. These statistics represent systematic success serving essential imperial functions unrelated to spiritual salvation. Population pressure requires controlled release mechanisms. Intelligence networks demand comprehensive surveillance infrastructure. Labor shortages need renewable conscription sources. Warp manipulation requires psychic fuel harvested through concentrated devotion. Shrine worlds will continue operating exactly as designed because the Imperium weaponizes humanity's desperate search for meaning into quantifiable resource extraction. The procedural reality admits no alternatives. Hymns rise like pressure from machines that never cool. Millions of voices compressed into ritual cadence, feeding psychic collection apparatus, while believers assume divine communion. Custodians complete their work as entry clearance begins. Logging standard metrics. 16 litres sanctified detergent, 49 metres blessed cloth, 3 brushes, warm beyond service tolerance. Tomorrow requires identical preparations. The eternal procession advances with mechanical precision.